The first sign was a distortion in the firmament, a silent convulsion rippling across the void above Segmentum Solar. Astropaths felt it before the augurs detected it, a pressure like the breath of a dying god exhaled through the warp. Their eyes bled as they screamed of an emerald wound tearing open the heavens, and their attendants dragged them away, praying the Emperor would seal whatever horror sought entry. But the rift only widened, its edges glowing like molten glass, until the night itself seemed to pulse with unnatural radiance. Explorator fleets halted in confusion, their machine spirits whispering danger through glitching vox chants. Aboard the battleship Sanctus Veritas, Tech Priest Vorlun recorded readings that defied every canon of Mechanicus lore, for the anomaly did not behave like a warp storm nor a meteor. It trembled with a heartbeat, a pulse, a rage. Then it broke. A column of searing green fire tore free, spiraling downward with the weight of a collapsing star. It was not a fall but a fury given form, ripping through void shields of orbiting defense platforms as if they were parchment. Sirens wailed across the subsector as the object descended toward a shrine world below, a world of spired cathedrals and chanting pilgrims. Vox transmissions choked with static as the incoming mass burned brighter than atmospheric friction should allow, as if the thing falling refused to be consumed. On the world's surface, worshippers gathered in the courtyard of the Basilica of Saint Iridion, pointing upward at the emerald comet streaking across the heavens. Some believed it to be a sign of the Emperor's wrath. Others fell to their knees, declaring it a miracle. But none could look away. Impact came like the fist of an angry god. The comet struck several leagues outside the basilica, sending shockwaves rolling across plains of cracked earth and ancient stone. Windows shattered along the pilgrim avenues, and towering statues of martyrs toppled from their pedestals. Dust rose like an ocean wave, swallowing entire procession lines in choking darkness. When it finally settled, the crater yawned wide and smoking, molten rock forming rivers of glowing orange around its broken rim. Arbite's patrols were the first to reach the site, their boots crunching through scorched debris. They expected demons or cult machinery or some foul relic of the heretic legions. What they found instead trembled faintly at the center of the crater, a shape too massive to be human, yet too corporeal to be warp-born mist. A body, muscular, unconscious, emerald in hue, skin reflecting the crater light with unnatural radiance. Reports reached the nearest cardinal almost instantly. His trembling voice reached the Inquisition half an hour later. A creature, he whispered through a trembling vox link, a green titan fallen from the sky. If it lives, it must be contained. If it dies, it must be sanctified. In the Emperor's name, send aid. But aid was not what the Chata galaxy sent. Inquisitor Malachiel of the Ordo Hereticus stood aboard his strike cruiser, listening to the final transmissions from the Arbites before the line dissolved in distortion. He recognized the cadence of warp interference, but this was different, less like possession, more like resonance, as though the creature's presence was disturbing the veil itself. He ordered an immediate deployment, vox masking all reports to prevent hysteria. For if this thing was a demon host, a Xenos weapon, or, his mind flinched at the thought, an unclassified abomination, then the Imperium needed answers, and fire. Within the crater, the green giant stirred. A low rumble vibrated through the earth as the creature's fingers twitched, grinding stone to powder. Its breathing deepened, each exhale a hot gust that sent ash rising from the impact site. The Arbites stepped back, shock maws raised, their hearts hammering beneath carapace armor. They felt the air thicken, as though a storm gathered within the creature's chest. Then its eyes opened, twin spheres of burning green, wild and ancient, and filled with a violence no imperial record could catalogue. The Titan rose. His muscles rippled like coiled iron, and with each movement the ground quivered. The Arbites shouted warnings, though their voices faltered as the creature took its first breath of this new world, a world that stank of incense, gunmetal, and fear. He did not understand the stone-spired horizon or the armored figures circling him. He knew only dislocation, confusion, and the faint echo of a name that felt like a memory fading in smoke. Hulk. The nearest Arbite fired. The bolt round struck Hulk's shoulder, bursting against his skin like a spark. Hulk flinched, not from pain, but from the instinctive surge of something deep and primal. The Arbites advanced, more shots striking, ricocheting harmlessly. Hulk's breath quickened, his pulse thundered. His rage grew, first as an ember, then as an inferno. He exploded upward with a roar that cracked the crater rim, a sound so colossal it sent birds fleeing from distant spires and froze pilgrims in mid-prayer. Hulk leapt, landing with crushing force before the Arbites, and the shockwave hurled them backward like dolls caught in a storm. From orbit, Inquisitor Malakil watched the seismic readings spike into impossible ranges, each tremor marking the creature's rising fury. He whispered a prayer as he donned his armor. Not for protection, but for clarity. For something told him this was not the arrival of a mere beast. It was the herald of catastrophe. As the Hulk stood amidst the ruin of his landing, surrounded by shattered stone and terrified soldiers, another tremor rolled through the sky, not from him, but from something answering him through the warp, something watching, something hungry. And far above, unseen by any mortal eye, the first demon turned its gaze toward the Emerald Titan and smiled. The question that chilled the Shiite subsector had only just begun to take form. What force had torn this being across the stars, and what doom followed in its wake? The tremors spreading from the crater carried far beyond the broken earth, rolling through the pilgrim avenues of the shrine world, like the slow heartbeat of a waking titan. Dust drifted from vaulted ceilings, candles flickered in the wind of unseen currents, and the great bells of the Basilica of Saint Iridion swayed on their chains as if stirred by a ghostly hand. Those inside whispered of omens, of saints returning in wrath, yet no comfort followed their trembling prayers. For the Emerald Giant had risen, and his footsteps echoed like the march of a forgotten god striding through mortal lands. Hulk moved not with purpose, but with confused instinct, drawn toward the looming silhouette of the basilica that rose above the plains like a fortress carved from holy stone. He did not know this world, nor the people who swarmed around him like insects, and his disorientation twisted with the simmering anger burning beneath his skin. Every sound felt sharp, every light too bright, every breath an intrusion, and though he tried to suppress the rising storm, his pulse betrayed him with each heavy beat. The Arbites regrouped at the base of the basilica steps, forming a trembling line of shields and shock mauls. Their sergeant barked orders through a vox grill that crackled with static, the signal warping as Hulk approached. Behind them, pilgrims pressed against the inner gates, clutching relics and prayer scrolls, pleading for the Emperor's protection. To them, the green-skinned Titan was no lost wanderer or misunderstood soul. He was a harbinger, a monster birthed from the warp's poisoned sea. They had lived their lives shaped by scripture and fear, and in their eyes, the creature advancing toward their sacred home could be nothing less than an abomination in need of purging. Hulk paused at the foot of the stairs, nostrils flaring as he took in the scent of incense drifting from the great doors. He felt the vibration of thousands of whispered prayers, yet their meaning escaped him. All he understood was the presence of fear, thick as the dust swirling around his feet. The sergeant raised his hand. Bolters clicked. Hulk's eyes narrowed. The first volley struck like a swarm of metal insects, pelting his chest and arms with explosive impacts. Smoke curled from his skin. The pain was minimal, but the violation ignited something deeper than irritation. A memory stirred of worlds where he had been hunted, caged, exploited, of enemies who believed weapons could bend him into submission. His breath deepened, his muscles tightening like drawn cables. He took a step forward. The Arbites fired again. Pilgrims screamed. Hulk roared. The nearest soldiers were thrown aside as if caught in the wake of a hurricane, their bodies crashing against stone pillars with bone-jarring force. The basilica doors slammed open as priests rushed out, swinging censers and chanting litanies meant to drive back demons. They believed their words carried divine strength, but as Hulk's roar washed over them, their faith wavered beneath the weight of raw, uncontrollable fury. Statues along the stairway cracked. Stonework shuddered. Birds fled from the cathedral spires as if the world itself had been wounded. Hulk charged up the steps, not out of hatred, but out of desperation, overwhelmed by sensations he could not understand. The basilica's interior loomed before him, glowing with candles and stained glass, an explosion of color and ancient artistry. But to Hulk, it felt like a cage of light closing in. Priests brandished relics, believing the Emperor's blessing would shield them. Hulk swept them aside in a single motion, not lethal but monstrous in its force, sending robed bodies tumbling across the marble floor. He reached the center of the nave, his breaths echoing through the vaulted chamber like storms trapped in stone. The pilgrims hiding behind pews trembled as he towered over them, the emerald glow of his skin casting warped shadows along the sacred murals above. One child's whimper carried through the silence. Hulk froze. Something in that small sound halted the storm pulling at his mind. He turned, confused, unsure, the rage receding for a fleeting moment beneath the faint echo of a gentler memory. A memory of a world where people had feared him, yet some had reached for him with compassion instead of guns. The moment did not last. A crack of thunder rang from the entrance as plasma fire streaked across the chamber. The Inquisition's first kill team stormed in, armor gleaming beneath purity seals and glowing lumen strips. Their commander advanced with the authority of a man who had judged entire worlds, his voice cold and absolute as he declared the giant a threat to the Imperium. The kill team fired in perfect discipline, blue-white bolts splashing against Hulk's back and shoulders with searing heat. The child screamed again, this time in terror, and the sound snapped the tenuous thread restraining the monster's fury. He turned on the inquisitorial force, roaring with a violence that shook dust from ancient rafters. Benches shattered, marble cracked, icons fell from the walls. The kill team held formation, but their weapons barely slowed the Emerald Titan as he charged, tearing through pews and debris like a beast unleashed from the heart of a dying star. The commander shouted for retreat, but his words drowned in the thunder of Hulk's steps. Outside, the sky darkened as warp static thickened the air. Astropaths fainted. Voxlinks drowned in distortion, and Inquisitor Malakil, still aboard his cruiser in low orbit, felt the psychic resonance sharpen into a blade that stabbed through the veil. This was no mere creature. This was a force that ignited the warp with every heartbeat. As the basilica shuddered beneath the battle unfolding within, Malakil realized the situation was no longer containment. It was escalation. And as Hulk tore through the kill team and roared at the heavens through shattered stained glass, something in the warp roared back. The basilica still trembled from the echo of Hulk's roar when Inquisitor Malakil descended toward the surface in his armored lander, its hull etched with wards and sigils that flickered beneath the rising warp static. Through the viewport, he saw the once holy landscape scarred by the Emerald Titan's passage. Shattered statues, broken walls, and a trail of destruction that cut straight to the heart of the shrine city. He felt none of the awe or fear plaguing the mortals below. Instead, he felt a cold certainty forming in the marrow of his bones. This creature was not a mere aberration. Its presence radiated power that bent the warp itself, a force that demanded decisive judgment before its fury spiraled beyond containment. The lander touched down amid ruins still smoking from the earlier clash. Servitors marched ahead, scanning for threats beneath the drifting dust. Malakil stepped into the open air and inhaled the scent of scorched stone and burning incense. Acolytes formed a protective ring around him, their weapons humming with sanctified charge. Yet he felt no need for their shield. His gaze fixed on the shattered basilica doors, where the emerald giant had vanished moments earlier. Inside the cathedral's depths, Hulk moved through the wreckage, as if trapped in a dream of violence and confusion. His breath still came heavy from the fight, though the wounds inflicted by the kill team had faded almost instantly. The last flames from stray plasma bolts hissed against the cracked marble floor as he stepped over the broken remains of pews. His mind wrestled between instinct and bewilderment. The voices around him, shouts, prayers, screams, twisted like echoes in a cavern. He wanted silence, peace, something to hold on to. But all he found in this world was fear. Fear in every face. Fear in every weapon raised toward him. Fear that fed the anger simmering beneath his ribs. The priest hiding behind the altar watched him approach with terror barely contained. One clutched a relic to his chest, whispering pleas to the emperor. Another held a trembling pilgrim child who sobbed into the folds of his robes. Hulk paused again when he saw them, some memory stirring of fragile things he had tried, once, to protect. His breath slowed. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, but the fragile calm cracked as the ground quaked behind him. Malakil entered the ruined basilica, his presence commanding, his aura cold and unyielding. The pilgrims gasped, some falling to their knees in reverence as the Inquisitor stepped through the debris, framed by flickering stained glass shadows. His armor caught the candlelight, casting sharp reflections across the devastated chamber. He looked not at the terrified civilians, nor at the broken sanctity around him, but directly at the green titan standing amidst the ruin. The psychic weight of Malakil's scrutiny pressed against Hulk's mind. Not an attack, but a probing assessment, ruthless in its precision. Hulk snarled, stepping back instinctively as the pressure built, an invisible force that scraped against his thoughts like a blade along stone. Malakil raised a hand, signaling his acolytes to hold their fire. He wanted a clearer understanding, a moment to judge this anomaly before unleashing the purgation he felt certain would be necessary. The Inquisitor's voice echoed through the shattered nave, crisp and commanding, each word sharpened by a lifetime of authority. He demanded answers from the creature, its origin, its allegiance, its purpose here. But Hulk did not understand the language, only the tone, the condescension, the accusation, the pressure tightening around his skull like a vice. Hulk's fingers curled, his jaw clenched. The faint murmurs of pilgrims turned to cries as Malakil stepped closer, his psychic probing intensifying. Hulk felt the old familiar panic rising, the sensation of being observed, restrained, dissected. A life of laboratories and cages flickered through his mind like lightning. He roared, a sound of primal rejection, shattering the psychic tether with sheer force of will. Malakil staggered half a step, surprise flickering in his otherwise unreadable expression. Few beings could break his psychic grip. None did so through raw, unfiltered rage. The acolytes opened fire. Bolts streaked past Malakil, exploding against Hulk's chest, arms, legs, sending bursts of holy flame cascading across his skin. Hulk staggered but did not fall. He turned toward them, fury igniting fully, and the storm returned. With one leap he closed the distance, slamming his fist into the ground so hard the shockwave tossed armored soldiers into pillars like ragdolls. Malakil raised a psychic barrier, the air cracking with ozone as Hulk's next strike collided with it. The force rippled outward, shaking dust from the rafters and shivering the stained glass still clinging to its frames. The Inquisitor held firm, though the ground split beneath his feet. Hulk roared again, striking the barrier with both fists, each blow cracking the shield further. Malakil felt the warp vibrate with the beast's fury, an unnatural resonance that disturbed even the wards engraved in his armor. He realized then that no conventional sanction, no force of arms or standard rituals would ever contain such a creature. The Emerald Titan was a threat that could escalate beyond planetary boundaries. Containment was no longer an option. Eradication became the only path. He gave the order. From outside the basilica, thunder rolled as orbital batteries aligned, preparing to unleash focused bombardment on the creature's location. Pilgrims screamed, priests wailed, and the acolytes scrambled for extraction. Hulk sensed the shifting air, the rising vibration, the imminent annihilation descending from the heavens. Panic twisted with rage, forming something explosive. The emerald glow around his skin intensified, casting monstrous shadows across the carved saints. The psychic presence in the warp responded once more, closer now, hungering with anticipation. Malakil braced for the final strike, knowing the Titan would not fall easily, and Hulk, cornered, wounded in spirit if not in body, prepared to meet the next onslaught with unrelenting fury. But as the targeting arrays locked onto the basilica, another tremor rippled through the warp, an echo not of the Imperium, but of something far darker answering Hulk's rage with its own. The bombardment descended, and the galaxy leaned closer to witness what emerged from the fire. The first shells screamed down from orbit with the fury of a vengeful star, turning the sky above the basilica into a blistering curtain of fire. The bombardment struck with earth-shaking force, pulverizing sanctified stone and hurling shards of cathedral walls into the air like fragments of broken faith. Pilgrims fled in terror as shockwaves blasted through the shrine city, toppling statues and shattering stained glass in cascading storms of color. The basilica's spires collapsed inward, swallowed by smoke and flame. Amid the chaos, Hulk rose from the cratered floor, like a titan born from destruction, the bombardment's fury rolling off his skin in molten sparks. The emerald glow around him burned brighter, fueled by the confusion and rage churning inside his mind. Everything in this world attacked him. Everything pushed him. Everything screamed, begged, judged, or shot. He could no longer distinguish one threat from another. All of it blurred together into a single oppressive force that demanded resistance. Inquisitor Malakil pulled himself from the rubble, his psychic barrier flickering as he surveyed the devastation. He had expected the bombardment to shatter the basilica and bury the creature beneath tons of sacred stone. Instead, he witnessed the impossible. The green titan rising unharmed, incandescent with fury. He felt the warp tremble in response, as if something immense pressed its face against the veil, watching with hunger. The Inquisitor's instincts sharpened. This creature was no mere Xenos brute. It was an anomaly capable of bending the Imperium by its mere presence. And worse, its rage was growing. He activated his Vox, issuing an urgent command to the fleet. Reinforcements were required, not from the Ecclesiarchy, nor from the PDF, from warriors born to face the impossible. The Black Templars answered. Their drop pods tore through the smoke-filled sky, slamming into the ground with thunderous detonations that cracked the earth beneath Hulk's feet. From the impact cradles emerged armored giants, clad in black and white, their creeds etched upon their pauldrons. Chains adorned their armor, bolters glowed with heat, and purity seals fluttered like banners of war. Hulk smelled the metal and oil as they approached, heard the clank of ceramite boots, and felt the weight of their resolve. These warriors did not tremble like the others. They advanced with purpose, fearless, unwavering, their prayers echoing through Vox grills as they invoked the Emperor's wrath upon the intruding beast. Hulk roared at them, the sound tearing through the fires and dust like a shockwave. The Templars did not falter. Their marshal stepped forward, raising a sword etched with the oaths of 100 crusades. He signaled his warriors, and bolters thundered in unison. Explosive rounds hammered Hulk's torso, shoulders, and chest, ripping craters in the ground behind him as they detonated. Hulk staggered, forced back by the sheer volume of fire, each blast fueling his growing fury. His skin blistered, healed, blistered again. His breath came out in snarls that shook the fractured remnants of the basilica walls. A Templar charged from the flank, chainsword howling. Hulk turned just as the blade carved across his arm, sending sparks flying. Not pain, only provocation. Hulk seized the Space Marine by the chest plate and hurled him with such force that his armored body embedded itself into a broken pillar, the stone fracturing from the impact. Another Marine lunged, power fist crackling with lethal energy. Hulk met the strike with his own fist, the collision detonating a shockwave that blasted debris outward in a wide ring. The Marine was thrown back, armor dented, but alive, barely. Bolters continued their relentless barrage. Hulk leapt forward with seismic force, landing amid a squad of Templars and sending them flying. He ripped a bolter from one Marine's grip and crushed it like soft clay. A power sword slashed across his back, slicing deep for an instant before the wound sealed. Hulk spun, grabbed the blade mid-swing, and snapped it in half. The Templar stared at the broken hilt in stunned disbelief, and Hulk met him with a roar that seemed to warp the very air. The battle turned into chaos. Space Marines firing at point-blank range, chanting oaths of hatred. Hulk smashing aside armored bodies with earth-shaking strikes, the ground buckling beneath their conflict. Malakil watched from a vantage point atop the ruined eastern transept, gathering data, observing the pattern of the creature's rage. It grew with resistance. It amplified with fear. It surged with violence. The Imperium's greatest warriors were not quelling the beast. They were feeding it. For every blow delivered, Hulk responded with a strike fueled by escalating wrath. For every Marine wounded, the Titan grew stronger, more relentless, more incandescent. Malakil realized with mounting dread that they were not battling a creature. They were provoking a force of destruction that grew exponentially, A Templar chaplain stepped forward, crozius raised, chanting a litany so powerful the air vibrated with its cadence. His voice carried, through the smoke, a righteous condemnation, a call to purge the unclean. Hulk paused, momentarily disoriented by the thunderous cadence. The chaplain seized the moment, striking Hulk across the face with the full might of his relic weapon. The blow sent a shockwave through the air, staggering the Titan. Hulk blinked, confused by the impact. Not hurt, but shaken. Then anger deepened into something darker, something hotter. He seized the chaplain by the shoulders and lifted him effortlessly. The chaplain swung his crozius again, striking Hulk's chest, but the Titan barely reacted. With a roar that shook dust from the cathedral dome, Hulk hurled the chaplain through a shattered wall, sending him crashing into the open courtyard beyond. The Templars surged to protect their fallen brother. Hulk met them in a storm of fists, shockwaves, and bellowing fury. The ground trembled. The basilica groaned under the strain. The warp rippled like disturbed water, and Malachiel felt something stir beyond the veil, something answering the violence with hungry anticipation. The Inquisitor's decision solidified. This creature could not be contained by mortal warriors. It required an escalation beyond even the Templar's zeal. As Hulk tore through the last line of Marines surrounding the fallen chaplain, the sky above the shrine world darkened once more. Not with bombardment, but with the descending shadows of a greater threat soon to arrive. And the galaxy braced as the Emerald Titan roared again, louder than before, echoing through the warp like the birth cry of an apocalypse yet to come. The battlefield fell into a momentary, unnatural stillness after Hulk's last roar, as if the shattered basilica itself was holding its breath. Smoke drifted in torn veils across the ruins. Broken armor plates lay scattered like fallen feathers from mechanical angels, and the wounded moaned beneath collapsed stone. Yet beneath all the devastation, an even deeper tremor pulsed through reality, one not felt by flesh, but by the immaterium. Every psyker within a dozen light-years convulsed at the same instant. Their voices overlapped in a cacophony of agony as they clutched their skulls and fell to their knees, bleeding from eyes and nostrils. Hulk's fury had not simply echoed across the battlefield. It had resonated through the warp like the tolling of a colossal broken bell, fracturing the veil with each pulse of uncontrolled emotion. Aboard orbiting vessels, astropaths writhed in their sanctums, chanting in broken tongues as visions flooded their minds. They saw an emerald sun rising in a storm of blood. They saw chains fracturing. They saw something vast waking in the deep. One collapsed entirely, his last breath forming a single trembling whisper. It hears him. The warp churned in reply, curling like smoke drawn toward a flame. Hulk himself sensed nothing of this, though the world around him felt increasingly warped, distorted at the edges. The colors of the sky deepened, pulsing faintly with green undertones. Shadows lengthened where no light had shifted. The air seemed to carry whispers he could almost detect but never quite understand. His breath came in harsh bursts, the battle's frenzy still pounding in his veins. The fallen Black Templars lay scattered around him, groaning or unconscious, but the Titan paid them no heed. His mind spun in confusion and instinct. He felt trapped, hunted, and now something else. Something like an immense presence leaning close, tasting the edges of his rage. Malachiel sensed it too. The Inquisitor, bruised and battered from the earlier devastation, forced himself upright, using the fragmented remains of a saint statue as support. The psychic air around him had thickened into something viscous and oppressive. every breath felt like inhaling smoke from a burning library of forbidden tomes. Hulk had not simply disrupted the warp. He had become a beacon within it, a blazing signal that called out to anything capable of perceiving such power. And in that vast psychic ocean, countless things were listening. Malakil's instincts sharpened. He tasted corruption on the air, not from the creature, but from what was now drawn toward him. This was no longer a contained threat. This was an impending catastrophe. Below, Hulk staggered as another wave rippled through him, this time stronger, like invisible hands tugging at the edges of his mind. He growled, shaking his head as if to clear it. Memories flickered across his consciousness. Flashes of another world, another life. Faces he could no longer fully recall. The sudden pain of dislocation drove him to slam his fists into the ground with a thunderous crack. The earth split open, a jagged wound in the marble courtyard, and fire belched from fractured pipeworks beneath. The warp responded instantly. The crack widened unnaturally, glowing faintly with green-tinged light. Reality shuddered, and the horizon bent in a slow, nauseating curve before the distortion faded. Pilgrims fled the shrine city in panicked hordes, desperate to escape the creeping dread now saturating the air. Their prayers became frantic, rising in dissonant waves toward the heavens. Chapels that had stood for centuries flickered with failing lumen candles as the machine spirits within them wailed in static distress. Servo skulls dropped from the air, their optics flickering out one by one. Hulk felt all of it, the fear, the collapse, the suffocating pressure of a world recoiling from him. The confusion in him tangled with frustration, and frustration with anger, feeding the storm at his core. Malakil summoned what little focus he could gather, reaching into the warp with trained discipline to gauge the direction of the disturbance. What he sensed chilled him. The echoes of Hulk's rage had not dispersed as natural psychic energy would. They had coalesced, amplified, drawn together like predators circling fresh prey. Something ancient had taken notice, its interest spanning the gulf of the Imperium, a presence vast and terrible, shaped by millennia of hatred and conquest. The Inquisitor's breath locked in his throat. He recognized the signature. He had felt its echo only once before, on a world that no longer existed. Chaos. Not a demon alone, nor a minor warp entity reacting blindly. This was deliberate attention, a spear of will. Somewhere far beyond mortal sight, within the Eye of Terror itself, a warlord of nightmares had paused to turn his gaze toward the signal Hulk had unleashed. Malakil reeled from the psychic impression. It was not curiosity. It was recognition of potential. A being of infinite rage. A weapon of unstoppable force. A creature who grew stronger with every wound, every challenge, every fear. Something chaos would hunger to claim. Hulk roared again, but this time the sound twisted as it rose, distorted by the psychic pressure grinding against the veil. It felt as though the world recoiled from the cry, as though the very air bent away from the vibration. For the first time since entering this world, Hulk felt something resembling fear, an instinctive awareness that something immense and invisible was reaching for him through the dark. He bared his teeth, muscles coiling, seeking the source, but the threat was not physical. It was a weight pressing against his mind, calling him deeper into the storm. The sky above darkened further as warp-touched clouds formed in unnatural spirals. Thunder rolled with whispers hidden beneath its rumble. And in the depths of the Imperium, the first true echo of Hulk's existence reverberated back toward real space. A signal, a promise, and a summons. Something was coming, and it was coming for him. The sky above the shrine world twisted into a bruised tapestry of warp-tainted clouds, each spiral pulsing in answer to Hulk's uncontrolled fury. The echo of his presence continued to ripple outward, unsettling machine spirits, breaking astropathic wards, and sending shockwaves through the minds of those attuned to the Imperium. What had begun as a single cosmic accident was becoming a gravitational wound on reality itself. In orbit, Inquisitor Malakil stood before the hololithic display aboard the Sanctus Veritas, watching seismic readings spike in impossible intervals across the planet's crust. Hulk's roars were triggering continent-spanning tremors. His strikes were fracturing bedrock. His fury had ceased to be merely destructive. It was planetary. Malakil tightened his gauntleted grip on the command lectern, knowing the decision pressing upon him was one that only the most extreme circumstances could justify. The Black Templars had fallen. The Basilica lay in ruins. The warp writhed with growing agitation, and now an even greater threat was forming above the world. Something dark, drawn from the eye of terror by the Titan's resonance. The Inquisitor did not know how much longer he had before that presence manifested in material form, but he understood that waiting would invite disaster far beyond a single world's destruction. He activated emergency sanction protocols, his voice steady, though his pulse trembled beneath the armor. His order was simple, absolute and devastating. Prepare exterminatus. On the planet below, Hulk wandered through ruins scorched and trembling from the earlier bombardment, his footsteps cracking the earth in unstable pulses. He no longer understood where he was or why everything around him screamed and fled. His mind swirled like a storm, fear, confusion, fury, pain, all tightening into a knot could not unravel. The Basilica's shattered walls loomed like broken teeth around him, and beyond them, the shrine city lay in smouldering pieces. The air pulsed with a faint, unnatural light. His muscles twitched with each new tremor, as if his own heartbeat were cracking the world. He wanted quiet. He wanted the madness to stop. But every direction brought more destruction, and the sensation of being hunted grew heavier with each passing moment. Even without knowing the Word-Bearer's scripture or the Black Legion's hunger, Hulk sensed the malevolence drawn toward him. Something waited behind the air, something old, something hungering for the storm living inside him. And as that unseen gaze pressed harder against his mind, he clawed at his skull, roaring in frustration. The sound sent a shockwave rolling through the ruins, toppling weakened structures and collapsing what remained of the Basilica's central dome. Kilometers away, refugees fled across shattered bridges, their robes whipping in the warp-distorted wind. Some prayed aloud, begging the Emperor to smite the Emerald Beast. Others begged for deliverance from the psychic dread gnawing at their souls. But there was no salvation approaching them, only a final judgment burning in orbit. Malakil watched the exterminator's rituals unfold with mechanical solemnity. Tech priests intoned Binharik prayers as cyclonic torpedoes were loaded into launch tubes, their cores radiating annihilating potential. The ship's hololithic displays flickered with crimson runes, atmospheric cleansing, total destruction of biological matter, sterilization of tectonic plates. Malakil felt the weight of the moment settle upon him. Millions lived on the world below. Pilgrims, priests, refugees, and loyal citizens who had no understanding of the Titan's origins or the horrors drawn by his existence. Yet he saw no alternative. If Hulk continued to exist here, if he continued to roar, to fight, to feel, chaos would find him. And if chaos claimed him, the Imperium would face a catastrophe that could eclipse entire sectors. He locked his eyes on the image of the Emerald Giant, still staggering among the ruins like a wounded god. "In his name," Malakil whispered, "this world must burn so that more may live." The order was confirmed. The torpedoes launched. They streaked towards the atmosphere as blazing spears of fire, each one carrying the death of a world. Workers in the surviving manufactorums saw streaks of light descending and screamed warnings across Vox channels. Pilgrims knelt in the rubble, believing the Emperor himself descended in fury to punish the heretic creature. Hulk looked up, sensing the heat, the vibration, the burning momentum of something enormous falling toward him. He squinted at the incoming fire, confused, then felt a sudden, sharp instinct. Danger, greater than anything before. His heart pounded. His muscles tightened. The ground trembled beneath his feet as if the planet itself were afraid. The first torpedo struck the upper atmosphere, releasing a shockwave that flattened clouds and ignited the sky in searing brilliance. Hulk shielded his eyes, growling as the world brightened into a furnace. Winds howled, ruins shook. Ash swirled in violent spirals. He braced instinctively, though he had no understanding of what was coming. The second torpedo detonated higher, unleashing a cascade of atmospheric ignition that turned the heavens into a burning cage. The third fell straight toward the basilica ruins. Hulk roared at the descending fire, more out of instinct than defiance. The roar met the torpedo's sonic blast and fractured the air into rippling distortions. The warp responded instantly. Hulk's rage swelled into a psychic pulse so intense that reality buckled around him. The torpedo's trajectory twisted slightly, just enough that it shattered into the ground a dozen meters away instead of directly atop him. The explosion erupted like a newborn sun, consuming stone, bodies, and air in a blinding vortex of annihilation. The shockwave hurled Hulk across the ruins. He crashed through the remains of the basilica wall, ploughing into the open courtyard beyond. His skin burned, then healed, burned again, healed again in rapid, agonizing flashes. He roared, confused and hurt, his mind fracturing under the dual strain of physical destruction and psychic violation. The flames around him swelled into towering pillars as the atmosphere tore open. Malakil watched the impact readings and felt cold dread settle in his chest. The Titan was not dead. Through the flames and smoke, his life sign persisted, unstable, fluctuating but alive, and angrier than ever. Warp energy surged around him in visible ripples, bending light, distorting space, calling out with impossible resonance. The torpedo barrage had not destroyed the Emerald Giant. It had awakened something far more dangerous. And far beyond the shrine world, deep within the heart of the Imperium, a monstrous will stirred fully at last, turning its full attention toward the creature that had survived the death of a planet. The shrine world burned like a dying ember in the void, its once holy continents shattered beneath the cyclonic annihilation unleashed from orbit. Vast clouds of ash spiraled into the upper atmosphere, glowing with the heat of dissolving stone and vaporized oceans. Lightning crackled across the ruin. Warp-charged storms forming from the psychic wound Hulk had carved into reality with every pulse of his rage. What should have been a lifeless husk, reduced to drifting, molten fragments, still throbbed with seismic readings centered around a single impossible point, the Emerald Titan who refused to die. From the bridge of the Sanctus Veritas, Inquisitor Malakil stared at the data in stark disbelief. Exterminatus had ended civilization stronger than this world, yet the Hulk still lived, moving amid the inferno as if the planet's death throes were merely another battlefield tearing beneath his feet. But Malakil's disbelief shifted swiftly into dread as new signals bloomed across the void. Warp signatures blacker than the surrounding night, forming from distortions that flickered like the opening eyes of predatory beasts. Alarms wailed through the cruiser as Vox officers shouted warnings, their voices slipping into fearful tremors. Dozens of small, jagged formations emerged from the shimmering folds between real space and the Imperium, each vessel painted in the obsidian livery of a name whispered in every nightmare of the Imperium. The Black Legion. Their ships glided toward the burning world like carrion creatures drawn to a battlefield feast. Their prows bore the 8-pointed sigil of chaos undivided, and the warp wake trailing behind them churned with the screams of bound souls. Malakil felt the echo of their presence slam into his mind, a cold certainty that matched the psychic disturbances Hulk had stirred. They had come for the Titan. Below, amid the scorched plain where firestorms still fed on exposed mineral veins, Hulk staggered through molten debris. Every breath he drew seethed with heat and dust. Every footfall split the cracked ground into glowing fissures. His skin was blistered and darkened from the near-apocalyptic blast. Yet each wound healed in moments, sealed by the same furious vitality that had let him survive the death of a world. The atmosphere around him crackled with warp static, warping colors and distorting sound. He felt it again, the oppressive sensation of being watched by something vast and hungry. He snarled at the empty sky, instinctively sensing the threat descending from the void even before the first dropships punched through the dying atmosphere like shards of black metal. The Black Legion deployed with brutal precision. Their gunships screamed through the burning haze, engines howling as they carved trenches of melted slag across the plain. Ramps slammed open, and traitor Astartes emerged in formation, towering warriors clad in midnight armor etched with runes that pulsed with warp energy. Their golden eye symbols glinted like the gaze of their dark master, and their movements radiated the confidence of veterans hardened through 10,000 years of war. Hulk saw them as dark shapes through the heat-blurred air, giants approaching, larger and heavier than the armored warriors who had assaulted him earlier. These ones moved differently, with a predatory purpose that set his nerves on edge. At their head marched a Chaos Champion adorned with trophies taken from worlds long dead. Horns curled from his helm like the mandibles of a beast, and chains bearing skulls clattered against his armor. He raised his demon-forged blade, pointing its burning edge toward the emerald figure standing amidst the ruin. The words that followed were not shouted but resonated through the scorched air, as if carried on the breath of the warp itself. "Behold the one who shakes the veil," the champion intoned. "A creature of endless wrath, cast into the galaxy at the hour of our ascendance. The War Master desires this beast. Its rage will become a weapon in his hand." Hulk understood none of the words, only the tone, the certainty, the dominance, the intent to claim him. He hated it instantly. He roared, the sound tearing through the burning atmosphere, shaking molten rock from the cracked cliffs nearby. The Black Legion advanced without hesitation. Bolters roared, vomiting shells infused with warp-driven malice. The rounds struck Hulk's chest, arms and face, exploding in blossoms of sickly, unnatural flame that clung to his skin. He staggered at the force, snarling as the burning ichor seared into him before his healing factor forced it out in sizzling rivulets. The pain ignited something deeper within him. These enemies did not fear him. They did not flee. They did not hesitate. They moved like predators who believed they could break him. He charged. The impact of his leap shattered the ground, sending waves of molten slag rolling outward. Hulk crashed into the first squad, smashing 2 Chaos Marines aside with a single sweep of his arm. Their armor cracked but did not shatter. These were not fragile humans, but ancient warriors whose bodies had been reforged in warp fire. One lunged at Hulk with a chain axe, the weapon's teeth screaming as they tore across his shoulder. Hulk roared and seized the Marine by the torso, crushing armor and bone until the weapon fell silent. Another Marine fired point-blank into Hulk's face, forcing the Titan back a step with each explosive round. Hulk surged forward through the blasts, grabbed the Marine's arm, and twisted until the corrupted armor buckled like foil. More dropships thundered down, disgorging sorcerers whose staffs glowed with runic power. Warp lightning arced toward Hulk, enveloping him in a storm of shrieking energies. For an instant he froze, his muscles seizing as reality twisted around him. He felt himself pulled in 2 directions, toward the physical world and toward the yawning abyss pressing against his thoughts. The sorcerers intensified the ritual, chanting in guttural voices that made the air vibrate and the ground shudder. Hulk screamed, the agony tearing through him as if claws raked across his mind. The warp pulsed in excitement, sensing an opening to invade. But pain and fear only made the Titan stronger. With a surge fueled by instinct and pure defiance, Hulk tore free of the psychic grasp. The backlash blasted the sorcerers off their feet, rupturing their armor as warp energy spiraled out of control. 2 were consumed entirely, transformed into shrieking vortices before collapsing into ash. The surviving Black Legionnaires faltered, shocked by the creature's resistance. The champion stepped forward, his demon blade roaring with hunger as he prepared to join the fray. But even he paused as he felt something shift in the Imperium. The warp itself recoiled. The Hulk's rage surged so violently that it sent shockwaves through the immaterial sea, disrupting the sorcerous connection that had begun to form. The psychic beacon that had lured them here now flared brighter, but it twisted out of control, slipping beyond the champion's attempt to bind it. Hulk, roaring, struck the ground with such force that the plane cracked open into a glowing chasm. The shockwave hurled Black Legionnaires in all directions, scattering them like iron fragments caught in a hurricane. The champion dug his blade into the ground to anchor himself, armor screaming under the pressure. Through the rising dust, Hulk glared at them, breathing hard, shaking with fury, but unbroken. The champion felt something close to awe. "He is no beast," he whispered through the Vox link. "He is a force." But behind that awe lurked another realization, darker and far more dangerous. The War Master would not merely want the creature. He would come for it. And Hulk sensed, dimly, through instinct rather than words, that the greatest threat had yet to step onto the battlefield. The air around the battlefield thickened into a suffocating fog of heat, ash, and warp static as the Black Legion regrouped across the molten plain. Their corrupted armor gleamed in the crimson glow of the dying sky, and their movements grew more cautious now that they had witnessed the Emerald Titan's strength firsthand. The Chaos Champion stood amid the wreckage, helm cracked, armor dented, yet his eyes burned with newfound hunger. He had expected to subdue the creature through overwhelming force or bind him with sorcery, but Hulk's defiance had shaken even his veteran certainty. Still, the War Master's command was absolute. The Titan would be taken, whether willingly or by the warp's own chains. The sorcerers, weakened but unbroken, formed a new circle around the chasm Hulk had created with his seismic strike. They raised their staves, now flickering with unstable runic fire. The warp answered their call eagerly, stirred into a frenzy by Hulk's raging presence. The air twisted into spiraling vortices, each pulse washing across the plain like tides of invisible claws scraping reality thin. Hulk felt the pressure gather, focusing on him, tugging at the edges of his mind with a force that was not physical but emotional. Whispers, shapes, memories, not his own, prodding at the cracks of his psyche. He snarled, baring his teeth, stepping back as the ground vibrated beneath him in low, sickening hums that made the stone feel alive. He could not see the source of the threat, yet every instinct screamed danger. The sorcerers chanted louder, their voices merging with the warp's hungry chorus. The champion raised his demon blade high, channeling their power into its molten edge. The weapon shrieked, a black, terrible sound, as the sorcery intensified. Warp light coiled around Hulk's limbs like smoke, then twisted into molten chains of ethereal metal, shimmering with curses older than mankind. The first chain tightened around his right arm. Hulk roared, tearing against it with all his strength. The ground cracked beneath his feet, molten earth exploding outward. But the chain did not break. It tightened, burning into his skin with agony unlike any wound he had suffered before. The pain sank deeper, not into muscle or bone, but into memory, into the core of his very being, as if it sought to bind not flesh, but the soul itself. Hulk staggered, a rare, brutal confusion rising in him. The world blurred. He swung violently, smashing the chain against the ground, but it merely sank into the stone as if hammered into the foundation of reality. Another chain wrapped his left arm. He convulsed, roaring so loudly the fires rippling across the shattered plain recoiled. The Black Legion warriors braced themselves, yet even at that distance, some were knocked to their knees by the sheer force of his defiance. The sorcerers pressed harder, bleeding from their eyes, as they channeled more power than their mortal frames could safely bear. Their chant deepened into guttural tones, each phrase ripping open thin tears in the air that pulsed like living wounds. Through those tears, something stared back. Hulk's breath faltered. A pressure seized his chest. He felt the world tilt, then vanish. The plane dissolved. The sky folded inward like fabric torn from its seams. Hulk fell, not down, not up, but through. He crashed into a ground that was not ground, a surface of pulsing flesh-like stone that shifted with each breath he drew. The sky above him churned with faces, screaming, laughing, weeping, merging into swirling storms of color. Mountains twisted like serpents. Rivers flowed upward in defiance of gravity. The air tasted of metal, sorrow, and ancient hatred. Whispers circled him, murmuring promises in languages he had never known yet somehow understood. His heartbeat thundered against the walls of this unnatural realm, echoing so loudly the landscape quivered. He had been dragged into the warp. The chains glowed brighter here, tightening around him with a strength magnified by the Imperium's boundless hunger. Hulk roared, tearing against them, each pull strong enough to shatter mountains in the material world. Here, his strength only distorted the environment, cracking the flesh stone beneath him, bending the sky, shaking the horizon. But the chains held. From the shifting mist ahead came shapes, towering figures clad in living shadows, their forms flickering between armor and something monstrous. They surrounded him, circling like predators around a wounded titan. One stepped forward. A colossal demon, its body a grotesque fusion of armor, bone, and flame, towered above Hulk with horns shaped like spiraling obsidian towers. Its voice slithered into Hulk's mind like cold fire. Your rage calls to us, Emerald Titan. Born from fear, shaped by fury, forged by suffering. You are closer to us than you know. Hulk roared, defiant, straining against the chains with raw power. The warp trembled in answer. The demon laughed, a sound like grinding steel. You cannot break these chains here. They are forged from your own anger, your greatest strength twisted into your prison. The words stabbed somewhere deep inside him. He strained harder, trying to silence the voices, the shadows, the whispers clawing at him. Memories surged and fractured. Bruce Banner's face flickering in shards, the pain of transformations, the loneliness of worlds he had broken by accident or by rage. The warp fed on those memories, swelling with delight. The demon leaned close, its face elongating into a mocking snarl. Give yourself to us. The War Master will make you more than a weapon. He will make you a god. Hulk's answer was a scream that tore the sky in half. The warp convulsed, collapsing inward as if recoiling from a wildfire. Chains cracked, not broken, but strained to their limit. The demons staggered, struggling to maintain their form against the shockwave of raw emotion. Hulk surged upward, tearing the chains taut, muscles swelling with strength he did not know he possessed. The ground split beneath him, and the demon was flung backward into the abyss with a roar of outrage. For an instant, light pierced the warp, green, radiant, volcanic, and the chains quivered. A second later, reality snapped back. Hulk slammed into the molten plain, shattering a crater into the burning earth. The chains still clung to him, now smouldering, weakened but unbroken. Around him, the Black Legion reeled, the sorcerers coughing blood, their ritual shattered by the Titan's defiance. But the warp had tasted his strength. Chaos had marked him, and somewhere far away, in a throne of iron and shadow, a warlord whispered a single word that trembled across the Imperium. Mine. The molten plain still shuddered from Hulk's return as he dragged himself upright, chains of half-broken warp iron clinging to his arms like the remnants of a nightmare. The air around him rippled with residual warp distortion, each breath he exhaled rolling through the ash-thick atmosphere in waves of trembling heat. He felt stripped raw, his thoughts fractured, the echo of that monstrous realm still clawing at the back of his mind. Something had tried to claim him, something ancient, something vast, and though he had torn himself free, he sensed that whatever grasped for him had not retreated. It had only paused, watching now from a distance beyond comprehension. The Black Legion watched too, shaken for the first time since landing upon the dying world. Their champion, armor cracked and helm dented, stared at the Emerald Titan with a mixture of fury and awe. The warp chains had failed. The demons had recoiled. The ritual meant to bind the creature had shattered under the weight of its defiance. Even the sorcerers lay scattered across the molten earth, some convulsing from psychic backlash, others motionless. The champion tightened his grip on his demon-forged blade, flames licking along its edge as if hungry for a second attempt. But even he hesitated. The creature before him pulsed with a strength that twisted the air, a raw, unrefined power that made the warp shudder in response. To press further now was to risk drawing the War Master's gaze prematurely, and perhaps to risk losing his own life in the attempt. Hulk stood in the center of the battlefield, chest rising and falling in thunderous breaths. His eyes glowed more fiercely than before, bright with fury, but also with confusion. He did not know where he had been taken, nor why the world felt broken around him. He only knew he had been attacked, tormented, dragged into a place filled with shadows that smelled of death. Rage boiled in him, feeding off fear he could not name. The chains still clinging to his skin pulsed with dying embers of warp energy, and each pulse sent a jolt through him. Not pain, but a reminder of just how close he had come to being lost. Above the burning ruins, hidden within the layers of atmosphere and prayer-thick clouds, something stirred at the edge of perception, a presence vast and unmoving, a gaze that was not a gaze. It brushed against the warp, quelling its chaos in a silent ripple that spread outward like the turning of a tide. Across the shrine world's orbiting vessels, astropaths gasped, some collapsing in awe, others trembling as golden warmth flickered through the immaterial storm. Even aboard the Sanctus Veritas, alarms faltered for a moment as machine spirits quieted beneath an unseen influence, their binharic wails dissolving into reverent silence. Malakil felt it too. The Inquisitor dropped to one knee as the psychic pressure washed over him. Not oppressive, not violent, but immeasurably vast. He recognized it instantly, though he had never expected to feel it in his lifetime. This was no warp entity, no demon, no echo of chaos. This was something entirely different, an immeasurable will anchored not in the Imperium storms, but in the stillness beyond them. A presence that resonated with ancient authority, radiating a calm that was not peace but dominion. The Emperor, not awakening, not speaking, not intervening, merely watching. The realization chilled Malakil more than any demon's roar. For the Emperor's attention was a rarity beyond miracles. If his gaze fell upon this battlefield, then the creature standing in its center was not merely a threat. It was a cosmic anomaly that challenged the fabric of fate itself. The Inquisitor's breath trembled as he forced himself upright. He dared not reach out psychically, not toward that presence. Instead, he watched the giant below, wondering what notion of destiny could possibly bind a mindless titan of rage to the Emperor's silent scrutiny. Hulk felt it as a faint warmth on the back of his mind, a quiet sensation unlike the cruel whispers that had tried to claim him earlier. For a moment, the world felt less hostile. The sky's burning hues softened. The distant storm winds paused. Something beyond him seemed to weigh his presence with a patience that did not provoke or threaten. He did not understand it. He only sensed that, unlike everything else in this world, this presence did not seek to chain him, bind him, or break him. He lifted his gaze toward the sky, eyes narrowing as the warmth flickered faintly, like the last glow of a dying star. It faded as quickly as it had come, leaving behind only silence and the crackling of burning earth. The warp surged back into motion, chaotic and hungry once more. But the moment lingered in Hulk's instincts, a tiny, inexplicable calm buried beneath the layers of rage. The Black Legion felt the shift too. Their champion took one staggering step back, his demon blade sputtering for an instant as golden psychic resonance rippled across the battlefield. Demons howled in the Imperium, recoiling from the lingering scent of the Emperor's attention. The sorcerers gasped, clutching their helms as their connection to the warp momentarily faltered. When the champion regained his voice, it trembled with disbelief. "He watches this creature," he growled, voice low. "Why? Why would he concern himself with a beast?" His question went unanswered, for a quiet tension settled over the plain, more suffocating than the flames, more ominous than the warp storms, more haunting than the Emperor's silence. The Black Legionnaires regrouped uneasily, their weapons raised but their certainty shaken. They had come to claim a weapon for the War Master. They now feared they had stumbled into something far larger, a clash of cosmic forces far beyond their understanding. Hulk sensed the hesitation in them. His chains still smoldered. His muscles still trembled. But for the first time since arriving in this terrible galaxy, his rage did not erupt blindly. It tightened, focused, fueled not only by instinct but by something new, defiance. These warriors wanted to take him. The shadows wanted to twist him. Something golden far above merely observed him. He would not be owned by any of them. His next roar was different from the others. Not a cry of confusion or pain, but a challenge hurled into the burning sky. It rolled across the plain, shaking molten stone, echoing through the Imperium like a hammer striking an ancient bell. The Emperor's fleeting presence faded. The warp stirred in hunger. The Black Legion readied their weapons again. And Hulk, standing amid the ruin of a world, prepared for the next battle rising from the darkness. The molten plain still smouldered beneath Hulk's feet as he stood amidst the broken ranks of the Black Legion, his breath thundering through the ash-choked air. The lingering warmth of the Emperor's silent regard faded like a dying ember, leaving behind only the oppressive pressure of the warp and the cold, calculating threat of chaos closing in on all sides. The Black Legionnaires tightened their lines once more, shaken but unbroken, their discipline forged through 10 millennia of war. But before they could launch another assault, a new tremor shook the dying world, heavier, deeper, more deliberate than anything that had preceded it. The Black Legion champion paused, lifting his helm toward the horizon as the vibrations intensified, rolling across the molten earth in waves that made even corrupted stone groan. Something enormous was approaching. Hulk felt it too. The tremor pulsed through his legs, steady and rhythmic, unlike the chaotic ripples of warp energy. This was weight, machinery, purpose. He turned toward the horizon, just as a colossal silhouette emerged through the fiery haze, first a shadow, then a towering machine giant striding across the shattered land with the inevitability of a god descending from myth. The firestorms parted around it, its void shields tearing the violent winds apart like fragile cloth. Its footfalls cracked the ground into expanding spiderwebs of molten fissures. A Legio Titan. The Warlord-class engine of war was a walking cathedral of death, its armored plates carved with holy sigils now scorched from the planet's ruin. Massive turrets jutted from its shoulders, humming with the energy of plasma annihilation. A volcano cannon hung from one arm like a sunbound instrument of execution, and its other arm carried a power fist large enough to crush a main battle tank into slag. Beneath its helm-shaped head, 1,000 sensor lenses glowed with baleful blue light. The Titan's Vox amplifiers roared to life, projecting a voice that shook the very air. By decree of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the will of the Emperor, the abomination is to be purged. Let this world witness the cleansing fire. Hulk narrowed his eyes at the massive machine, instinct tightening every muscle in his body. He had never seen anything like it. Nothing from his own world had ever been so vast, so heavily armed, so monstrously alive with destructive potential. Yet he sensed no emotion in it, no fear, no malice, only duty. Its sheer presence pressed against him like an oncoming storm. The Black Legion champion snarled, realizing the Imperium had escalated beyond even exterminatus. This was not a machine summoned to destroy the Titan alone. It was a declaration that no trace of this world's corruption or its catastrophic anomaly would be allowed to remain. The Titan fired first. A deafening burst of light erupted from its shoulder cannons, streaking across the plain with the brilliance of a newborn star. Hulk barely had time to brace before the plasma bolt struck him, detonating with a force that vaporized molten stone and hurled him end over end across the ruins. He crashed through the remains of a cracked ridge, carving a trench through superheated debris before coming to a halt. Smoke curled from his skin, charred and blistered before his healing factor forced the burns away in rapid, painful pulses. He staggered up, dazed but unbroken, only to see the Titan already advancing, each step a seismic event. The Black Legion scattered to avoid the Titan's stride, their champion bellowing curses as their war against the Imperium's machine giants reasserted itself. Some fired upon the Titan's void shields, their corrupted bolters sparking harmlessly against the shimmering barrier. Others turned to halt instead, determined to subdue him before the Titan reduced him to ash. Hulk recognized their movement instantly. The sorcerers, recovering slowly, raised their staves once more, ready to bind him again. But the Titan drew their attention with a single devastating gesture. Its volcano cannon ignited, unleashing a beam of concentrated destruction that carved a blazing path across the plain. The beam struck the Chaos Sorcerers before they could disperse. In an instant, half the circle was vaporized, reduced to drifting ash. The sudden psychic collapse created a ripple in the warp that shrieked across the battlefield like tearing flesh. Hulk felt the echo of their destruction as a cold wind on his mind, and he roared, not for them, but for the renewed assault against him. He leapt toward the Titan, the ground exploding beneath his feet, a shockwave radiating outward from the force of his movement. But the Titan was prepared. Its power fist surged with auric energy, and as Hulk soared toward it, the fist swung with catastrophic momentum. The blow struck him mid-air. Hulk's body snapped backward with a force that fractured the air, sending him crashing into the molten plane hard enough to crater it again. A ring of debris shot outward, knocking Black Legionnaires and burning wreckage aside. Hulk lay still for only a heartbeat before his rage surged back, thrashing against the pain. He slammed his fists into the ground and propelled himself upward in another colossal leap. This time, he reached the Titan's knee joint, driving his fist into the towering limb with such power that the armor buckled inward, sparks erupting as servos screamed. The Titan staggered. Its void shields flared, flickering dangerously under the assault. Hulk struck again, each blow fueled by the escalating storm inside him. The Titan retaliated, with its power fist swinging downward in a roaring arc that shattered a nearby cliff face as Hulk narrowly dodged. He clung to the Titan's armor, tearing through adamantium plates with primal ferocity. Sparks and molten fragments rained around him. Inside the Titan's machine spirit, alarms blared in Binharic panic, screaming warnings to the princeps and moderati entombed within its sacred cathedral heart. "Reinforce the leg," the princeps snarled, sweat dripping beneath his neural helm. "It cannot be allowed to topple. Not here. Not now." The Titan's defensive systems activated instantly. Servo clamps extended from the armor, snapping shut around Hulk like mechanical jaws. He roared, ripping one apart only for two more to close around him. The Titan's chest cannons deployed, locking onto him with targeting arrays burning crimson. Hulk sensed the danger, muscles coiling, breath deepening. The cannons fired point blank. The blast engulfed the Titan's entire torso. When the smoke cleared, Hulk slid from the Titan's side, his skin charred black, steam rising in thick plumes. But he was not dead. He hit the ground trembling, forcing himself upright with a snarl that cracked the air. Each breath was agony, but the pain only fanned the fire within him into a larger inferno. His eyes burned brighter, a scorching green radiance intense enough to cast ghostly shadows through the smoke. The Titan aimed all its remaining weapons at him. But Hulk was no longer the same being who had arrived on this world. He moved, not with desperation, but with unstoppable certainty. He slammed a fist into the ground, sending a seismic shockwave roaring toward the Titan. The engine stumbled, void shields flickering. Hulk lunged, closing the distance with impossible speed. He seized the Titan's damaged leg and pulled. The ground shook as the god machine faltered. For the first time, the Titan's immense frame shifted off balance, its stabilizers screaming. The princeps shouted orders. The machine spirit wailed in rage. The world cracked beneath them. And Hulk pulled harder. The Titan tilted, just a fraction, but enough to change the entire war. And in that moment, a new force sensed the unfolding catastrophe, a Primarch, a legend, or something far older, drawn now by the escalating battle. The Titan would not fall yet, but the galaxy was already trembling. The Titan's immense frame groaned as Hulk pulled against its armored leg, the tortured shriek of adamantium echoing across the burning plain like the howl of a wounded god. Sparks rained from ruptured joints, molten metal dripping in thick rivulets. The Titan's stabilizers fought desperately to counter the impossible force dragging it down, pistons hammering, servos screaming. But each second the Emerald Titan's grip tightened, each heartbeat amplifying his unyielding fury. Inside the Titan's throne-like cockpit, the princeps felt the machine's pain pulse through the neural interface. His breath trembled as he sensed the Titan's fear, true, unfiltered fear, not of chaos, not of Xenos, but of the creature that defied the full weight of its colossal mass. He forced the machine spirit to steady, murmuring Binharic litanies as shockwaves trembled through the cockpit. "Stabilize," he commanded. "Stabilize in the Omnissiah's name." The Titan braced its other leg, slamming it into the molten ground with a seismic crash. The plane buckled beneath the impact, fissures spreading outward like cracks in glass. The Titan's upper weapons adjusted, aiming down toward the struggling figure below. Hulk felt the ground shatter around him, the heat rising in choking waves, but none of it slowed him. The firestorms, the molten stone, the burning air, all of it was rendered meaningless beneath the single, overwhelming instinct that now flooded his mind. Survive. He roared, veins glowing beneath his skin like molten emerald lines as his strength surged beyond its previous limits. Every emotion he had endured since falling into this galaxy, fear, confusion, pain, twisted into raw power feeding the storm inside him. He yanked again. The Titan's leg armor buckled further, plates warping like softened iron. The princeps felt the tremor of impending collapse and ordered an emergency output burst. The Titan's power fist charged with auric energy, rising to strike Hulk like a descending star. The atmosphere ignited around the limb as it fell. Hulk twisted at the last instant, releasing the Titan's leg as the fist crashed into the ground inches from him. The impact detonated a crater hundreds of meters wide, molten stone erupting in a geyser of fire. The explosion hurled Hulk backward, his body tumbling across the ruins before he slammed into a fractured cliffside. For a moment, the world spun, smoke swirling across his vision. Pain radiated through him, deep, bone deep. But before the sensation could settle, it was drowned beneath a rising surge of something darker, hotter, more primal than he had ever felt. The warp pulsed around him like a second heartbeat. He rose. The Titan turned its gaze toward the emerald shape emerging from the smoke. What stood there now was changing. Heavier, broader, veins burning like rivers of liquid green light. Hulk's eyes shone with an intensity that warped the air. A low, guttural growl rumbled from his chest, deeper and more resonant than any before. Even the Black Legionaries paused, their corrupted armor trembling under the psychic pressure radiating from the Titan's evolving rage. Warp light crackled along the plain, thin lightning arcs snaking across the molten ground toward Hulk as if drawn to him. The champion felt the hair on his neck rise beneath his armor. "He grows stronger," he whispered. "He grows because we resist." A single, horrifying truth settled over him. There was no upper limit to this creature. No peak, no plateau. Only escalation. The Titan, prepared to fire again, its volcano cannon charging with blinding intensity. Hulk felt the pressure building, sensed the weapon near critical discharge, and leapt forward with such force that the molten ground erupted beneath him like a volcanic blast. He struck the Titan's knee joint again, this time with a blow that exceeded every previous attack. The impact rippled through the Titan's frame, sending it lurching sideways. Its stabilizers screamed. Alarms blared. The Princeps's breath hitched as he felt the machine spirit recoil in pain. Hulk struck again, then again, each blow fueled by a rising frenzy he could no longer restrain. The Titan swung its power fist upward, determined to crush him before he reached the core. Hulk ducked beneath the blow, tearing chunks of armor free as he climbed the Titan's leg like a living avalanche. Sparks burst in violent showers. The Titan tried to swat him off, but Hulk seized the fingers of its massive fist, holding it back by sheer force. The machine strained, hydraulics whining, but Hulk roared and forced the fist aside, twisting the entire limb off-axis. Inside the cockpit, the Princeps felt his own arm wrench painfully through the neural link. He gasped, blood dripping from his nose, and the Moderati beside him shouted warnings as the internal systems flickered. Hulk lunged toward the Titan's torso, slamming his fist into the armor directly above its power conduits. The strike dented the adamantium plating inward like thin copper. Hulk struck again, breaking the shell. A surge of blinding energy exploded outward, engulfing him in furious white light. The Titan staggered, void shields collapsing in a burst of static. The Princeps screamed orders, desperately trying to maintain the connection. But the Titan, wounded and furious, reacted with primal instinct. It reared back, lifting its power fist high, then brought it down with the fury of a descending meteor. The blow hit Hulk squarely, driving him into the molten earth. The ground shattered, molten rivers erupting around him. The Titan hammered again, unwilling to allow its enemy a moment to rise. Each strike shook the world, but each strike also fed the storm. Beneath the crushing force, Hulk's rage reached its breaking point. Not the kind of breaking that heralded defeat. This was the shattering of barriers, the fracturing of limits. His vision burned white-green. His muscles swelled with impossible force. The molten ground around him vibrated, then rose in rippling waves as the warp heaved in response to his fury. The Princeps sensed it, felt the immaterial ripples slicing through the void like expanding shock waves. The Titan hesitated, recognizing the shift too late. Hulk erupted upward with a roar that tore through the air like the scream of a dying reality. He caught the Titan's descending fist and stopped it. Not slowed, not deflected. Stopped it. The Titan's massive arm shuddered, frozen mid-strike. Hulk's roar intensified, rattling shattered cathedrals miles away. His emerald glow intensified into blazing green fire that twisted through the air in violent arcs. The Princeps cried out as the Titan's servos overloaded, joints cracking under impossible tension. The machine spirit screamed through the cockpit, Binharic distress codes flooding the interface. Hulk clenched his hands and crushed the Titan's fingers, snapping adamantium digits like brittle bone. The Titan lurched back. Hulk leaped, seizing its torso with both hands, and the earth groaned beneath them. He pulled. The Titan staggered, nearly collapsing. The Black Legion watched in stunned silence. For the first time, the Colossus of War faltered before a living being's bare strength. The Titan fought to stay upright, but Hulk's wrath only grew. The air vibrated, the warp quivered, and something far beyond the battlefield stirred, something vast, ancient, responding now to the emerald beacon tearing at the fabric of reality. Hulk roared again, his strength spiraling past mortal comprehension, and the universe shuddered as a new presence, one of mythic magnitude, turned its attention toward him. The world quaked beneath Hulk's feet as he tore the Titan's armored torso open, molten circuits spilling like mechanical blood. Sparks cascaded over him in violent showers, each flash illuminating the savage fury twisting through his features. The Titan's machine spirit screamed in corrupted Binharik, a sound only the princeps could hear. Yet even that voice, ancient, sacred, forged for war, seemed fragile compared to the unstoppable force ripping through its hull. Hulk roared, his voice splitting the air with a violence that warped sound itself. But deep within him, beneath the avalanche of anger and the rising psychic storm, something small flickered, something fragile, something drowning. A thought that was not a thought, a memory, a whisper of a name. Bruce. It came not as a word but as a feeling, surfacing from the depths of Hulk's mind like a drowning man reaching for light. The Titan delivered another blast from its chest cannons in blind desperation, searing Hulk's flesh and forcing him back a step. The pain shot through him like lightning, but instead of feeding the rage, it cracked something inside. Beneath the roar, beneath the fury, beneath the instinct to crush, tear, survive, there was a gasp. A fragile voice, a mind buried under a mountain of rage. Hulk staggered, for the first time in this hellish world, not because of a weapon, but because the storm inside him faltered. The molten ground blurred, the Titan's outline wavered, the Black Legion's distant shouts dissolved into echoes. The warp's hungry whispers dimmed. In their place rose something quieter, far more painful, a memory of a world that felt impossibly distant now. A lab, a scream, a transformation, and a man kneeling in the debris of his life, desperately trying to breathe. Bruce Banner opened his eyes. Dry change was not physical. Hulk's massive form still towered over the battlefield, but inside, behind the burning pupils, something shifted. The rage did not vanish. Nothing could ever erase it, but it thinned, just enough for Banner's consciousness to emerge. He felt the heat of the dying world. He felt the chains of warp metal still clinging to Hulk's skin. He felt the Titan trembling before him. But what consumed him most was a rising horror. How many? Banner whispered inside his own mind. The words trembled, barely forming. How many have died because of me? The question stabbed deeper than any blade. Memories surged, pilgrims crushed beneath collapsing stone, soldiers hurled through the air like broken dolls, cities burning under his footsteps. He had not meant to destroy anything. He had not come here to kill. He had fallen from the sky in confusion, terrified alone. But the world had met him with fear and fire, and Hulk had answered in kind. Banner's breath hitched as guilt crashed over him in crushing waves. He tried to speak aloud through Hulk's throat, but only a low, trembling growl escaped. The Titan sensed the hesitation and seized the moment. Its remaining weapons recharged, energy building in furious hums. Servitors inside frantically rerouted power. The princeps, blood dripping from his neural sockets, forced the machine spirit into compliance. "End it," he whispered through clenched teeth, "before it rises again." Banner felt the targeting arrays lock onto him. He knew he could not dodge all the shots. Not now, not like this. His heart pounded, but the panic was not Hulk's. It was his own, clear, sharp, human. "I didn't want this," Banner whispered inside. I wanted to understand what happened. I wanted to wake up somewhere safe. Safe. Such a naive word in a galaxy that knew only suffering. The Titan fired. The blast struck Hulk's shoulder, tearing flesh and bone apart in a searing burst. Hulk roared in agony, and Banner felt the pain as if it were his own nerves screaming. The conflict inside him twisted violently. Hulk wanted to fight. Hulk always wanted to fight. But Banner, buried within the raging Colossus, wanted something else. Something he had not felt since arriving in this nightmare. He wanted to stop. "Please," Banner whispered, to Hulk, to himself, to the stars, to whatever force had tossed him into this merciless place. "Please, stop this." For a moment, brief, fragile, Hulk hesitated. His fist trembled, his chest heaved. The flames reflected in his eyes flickered with confusion. The warp sensed the weakness immediately. Like sharks tasting blood, demonic whispers surged, pushing at the cracks in Hulk's mind. They coiled around Banner's guilt, magnified it, twisted it. They showed him worlds burning under Hulk's footsteps, bodies crushed, planets shattered. They whispered that Hulk was not a victim, but a harbinger. Destruction, incarnate. The perfect vessel for chaos. Banner recoiled, instinctively trying to force them out. The effort tore through him like a psychic blade. Hulk's massive hands clutched his head, roaring in shared torment. The Black Legioniners watched with fascination as the Titan convulsed, torn between two wills, one of rage, one of remorse. "You see it now," the champion shouted across the battlefield. "The burden it carries, the guilt. Chaos can free him of it. Chaos can free him of everything." The words slithered like venom through Hulk's thoughts. Banner felt himself drowning again. The Titan prepared its final shot. Banner gasped internally, reaching for the last thread of clarity he had. "If you don't take control, we die. We both die." The truth struck Hulk harder than the Titan's blows. Hulk's roar tore the sky again, but this time it carried more than fury. It carried pain. It carried conflict. It carried the sound of a mind breaking and refusing to break. Banner was still in there, still fighting, still afraid, still alive. And if he fell now, the warp would devour everything he was. Hulk staggered upright, one arm mangled, chains hanging like broken shadows. The Titan aimed again. The Black Legion braced. The warp hissed in anticipation. And in the trembling silence before the next strike, Banner whispered one final plea into the storm. "Don't let me become what they want." The Titan's reactor thundered as it gathered power for the killing shot, its armor glowing along rune-etched seams as heat built to catastrophic levels. The machine spirit shrieked in a frenzy of Binharic warnings, but the princeps ignored its fear. His thoughts were locked on the Emerald Titan staggering below, a creature torn between agony and defiance. He sensed weakness, sensed hesitation, and he would strike before the monster could recover. Servo-servitors chanted machine prayers as the cannon's coils flared white, brighter than the burning sky. Hulk braced himself, breath ragged, Banner's fading plea echoing inside like the last voice in a collapsing world. His mangled arm hung limp, regeneration slowed by the emotional storm inside him. Rage demanded retaliation. Fear demanded escape. Banner begged for restraint. Chaos whispered for surrender. The pressure of all four forces crushed him, threatening to tear his mind apart. But before the Titan could fire, a new sound split the air. thunder not born from the machine god's fury, but from drop pods screaming through the atmosphere like iron meteors. They slammed into the battlefield with seismic force, their ceramite petals unfolding into ramparts of steel. Blue armor surged forth from the smoking pods, ultramarines, markings scorched but unmistakable. Their bolters roared as they formed a firing phalanx between Hulk and the Titan. Moments later, the sky tore again with contrails of descending green. The Dark Angels arrived in disciplined silence, their robes fluttering like shrouds of judgment. Plasma fire streaked across the plain, hammering against the Titan's exposed joints as a combined strike force of two ancient legions rallied in the shadow of apocalypse. The Titan's targeting arrays recalibrated instantly, shifting from Hulk to the unexpected reinforcements. The Princeps cursed, ordering the Titan's guns to prioritize the new threat. Massive cannons pivoted, belching fire toward the advancing Astartes. But the Space Marines did not falter. They moved with the unity of warriors bound by millennia of doctrine. Ultramarines forming shielded lines, Dark Angels dispersing into flanking vectors with cold precision. Explosions tore across their ranks. Bodies vanished in plumes of molten dirt and shrapnel. Yet still they advanced. These were not the mortal soldiers Hulk had seen earlier. These were legends carved into the Imperium's marrow. For a moment, Hulk simply stared. They weren't shooting at him. They weren't running away. They were fighting something else. That confusion, that breath of hesitation, allowed Banner's presence to rise further inside him. The human voice reached through the storm, fragile, terrified, yet grasping for control. "They're not your enemies," Banner whispered. Hulk blinked through smoke and pain. "They're trying to stop the Titan. They're trying to contain this." Banner's voice broke as he spoke the word. Contain. Control. Words he had lived beneath his entire life. Hulk's fingers curled slowly, breath deep and uneven. The rage eased by a fraction, enough for the world to come into focus again. But the battle around him only escalated. The Ultramarines unleashed a barrage of crack missiles that detonated against the Titan's flank, ripping open a vent of belching fire. The Dark Angel's plasma cannons carved molten scars across its weapon limbs, and from their rear lines emerged a towering figure in ornate cobalt armor, an Ultramarines captain, blade ignited with crackling energy as he bellowed orders across the fray. "Hold the line. Force the God Machine back. In the Emperor's name, stand firm." The Titan answered by sweeping its power fist across the field, crushing squads beneath a single colossal swing. Astartes scattered, some thrown like broken dolls, others reduced to red mist. Yet even as their brothers fell, the remaining Marines surged forward with fury bordering on suicidal zeal. Hulk watched them, chest heaving, Banner's guilt twisting inside him. They were dying because of him, because they thought stopping the Titan was the only way to prevent something worse. The warp trembled around him, as if savoring the chaos, as if feeding on every drop of blood spilled in his presence. The Princeps sensed the moment slipping away. "Clear a line," he barked through the neural interface. The Titan's machine spirit rallied, a shuddering roar echoing through its internal circuits. Its main cannon began to gather power once more, light building into an incandescent spear aimed directly at Hulk. "Kill the anomaly," the Princeps screamed. "Kill it before it ascends." Hulk felt the weapon's heat building. Banner felt the terror rising. The warp felt the feast approaching, and the Space Marines saw the kill shot forming. The Ultramarines captain shouted for his devastators to focus fire on the cannon's coils. Dozens of rockets streaked toward it, detonating in a blistering cascade that rocked the Titan violently. but not enough. The machine stabilized, armor hissing with molten rents. The cannon continued to charge. Hulk stared up at the glowing barrel, the light reflecting in his eyes. Banner whispered inside him, frantic now. "Hulk, if that hits us, we're dead." The words shook something deep within. Hulk's breath steadied. His fists clenched. His muscles tightened until they sang with tension. The glow behind his eyes intensified into brilliant, violent fire. The machine fired. In the instant before impact, Hulk moved. The blast struck him squarely in the chest, a beam that could melt mountains. The world disappeared in a storm of blinding white. The ground erupted. Astartes were thrown through the air. The Titans staggered from the recoil, and at the center of the explosion came a sound, a roar that defied physics, defied agony, defied death itself. Hulk stood amidst the inferno, feet buried in molten stone, chest scorched to black bone in places, skin torn away in ragged sheets. And he pushed the beam back. He pushed it, hands trembling, legs shaking, Banner's terror blending with Hulk's fury until they were indistinguishable. A human mind and a monster's strength fused in survival. Hulk advanced step by step, forcing the Titan's weapon upward. The beam bent against his palms, distorting, sputtering, melting the Titan's own armor. The princeps screamed as systems overloaded, alarms blaring in hysterical cascades. Hulk roared and shoved the beam aside entirely, sending it lancing into the sky in a spiral of molten fire. Astartes stared. The Black Legion stared. Even the warp seemed to pause. Hulk's chest heaved, regeneration burning like acid as Banner slipped deeper into the storm, exhausted. But one truth had taken root inside him, a fragile, desperate truth. He did not have to be what Chaos wanted. He did not have to be what the Imperium feared, but the Titan still stood. The Black Legion still advanced. And something far greater was approaching through the warp, drawn toward the emerald beacon of Hulk's defiance. The last stand had only just begun. The battlefield lay drowned in fire and ruin, its molten plains trembling as forces beyond comprehension converged toward a single point of existence, the Emerald Titan standing at the heart of annihilation. Hulk's skin still smoked from the cannon blast he had forced aside, his muscles twitching with the strain of defying a weapon meant to unmake continents. Ultramarines and Dark Angels struggled to regroup, bodies battered, armor scorched. The Black Legion pressed in from the shadows, emboldened by the weakening Titan, yet wary of the monstrous being that had stood against it and survived. But all those battles, all those armies, all those fallen warriors were merely preludes to something deeper, an unraveling in the warp so profound that even demons hesitated at its edge. For Hulk had not just fought a machine or sorcery or mortal soldiers. He had fought the warp itself, and the warp now responded like a wounded beast. Above the shattered horizon, the sky tore open. It did not burst or burn. It simply peeled apart like the lid of creation being lifted by an unseen hand. A jagged wound spread across the heavens, leaking crimson lightning and oceans of shadow. The light of distant stars bent around the tear as if gravity itself recoiled in terror. Every warrior on the surface froze, Astartes, traitors, even the Titan's machine spirit, each of them sensing the arrival of something that dwarfed their purpose entirely. From within the rift stepped a colossal figure, towering, radiant with warp-forged might, its armor forged from the nightmares of 1,000 dead worlds. A halo of shimmering flame curled behind its helm, casting the battlefield in spectral illumination. Its presence distorted the air, forcing molten stone to ripple like water. And though its silhouette shifted as if half anchored in reality and half in the immaterium. One truth settled like ice upon every mind. A Primarch had come, not loyalist, not traitor, something in between, carved from ancient memory and the warp's own hunger. A figure whose identity had been lost to myth and contradiction. Rumoured dead, rumoured ascended, rumoured devoured by the immaterium itself. The figure's voice rolled across the battlefield, deep and resonant, neither human nor demon. A being of unchained fury, born beyond the stars, and now placed upon my path. His helm turned toward Hulk, and the Titan beneath him groaned under the weight of his attention. The galaxy trembles because of you. Hulk stared upward, breaths ripping through his chest in ragged bursts. Banner, somewhere deep within, watched in horror. This was no mortal warrior, no machine, no sorcerer, no beast of chaos. This was something ancient, something forged for destruction, at a scale Hulk had never known. Yet his instincts did not command retreat. They commanded challenge. His fists clenched, the green glow behind his eyes intensifying once more. The Primarch extended his blade, a weapon forged from warp light and grief. Its edges shimmered as if slicing through dimensions simply by existing. "If chaos would claim you," he said, "then I must break you." His presence pressed upon Hulk like a gravitational wave. "If the Emperor watches you, then I must test you." His armor hummed with power. "If you are neither, then you are a danger to all." He stepped forward. The world cracked beneath his footfall. The duel began. The Primarch moved with speed that defied his size. One moment distant, the next before Hulk in a blur of incandescent motion. His blade slashed down, carving molten furrows in the earth. Hulk leapt aside, the heat of the strike searing his skin. He charged, wrapping both arms around the Primarch's waist, slamming into him with the force of a meteor. The impact hurled them through a smoking ridge, stone exploding outward in a storm of embers. But the Primarch rose instantly. He struck Hulk across the jaw with a blow that would shatter a tank. The Titan staggered, teeth grinding, earth buckling beneath him. Hulk swung back, fist crackling with raw fury. The Primarch caught the blow in one hand, his armor groaning, then twisted, sending Hulk crashing onto his back. The ground cratered beneath the impact, lava bursting upward. Hulk rolled away, narrowly dodging a downward slash that cleaved a glowing scar into the world. The Primarch's voice thundered across the plain. "You resist the warp. You defy annihilation. Your strength grows with pain." He raised his blade, its edge humming like a star about to collapse. "But can you withstand purpose?" He lunged again. Their clashes became thunder, each strike a quake, each impact a shockwave. Ultramarines were knocked from their feet. Black Legionnaires scrambled for cover. The Titan struggled to maintain balance as the earth beneath it liquefied. Hulk and the Primarch collided again and again, green fire against warp light, primal instinct against forged divinity. Hulk seized the Primarch's arm, muscles bulging with unrestrained fury. He roared into the Primarch's face, a roar that bent the air, shook the clouds, and sent shards of molten earth hurtling through the stormlit sky. For a moment, the Primarch faltered. Then he unleashed a burst of psychic force. The world vanished in a cyclone of light. Hulk flew backward, tumbling through fire and ash, until he smashed into the remnants of a toppled spire. The impact buried him in stone. The Primarch approached slowly, blade glowing with silent finality, molten ground swirling around him like a living sea. Hulk pushed rubble aside, rising again, but Banner's voice trembled inside him, fraying under the battle's weight. "We can't win this, not like this." Hulk ignored the fear. His chest heaved, his vision blurred, his rage swelled, no longer wild, but sharpened by desperation. He leapt, fist blazing with green luminescence, crashing into the Primarch with enough force to split mountains. The Primarch staggered, armor fracturing along its ribs, light streaming from widening cracks. At last, the Primarch's composure broke. "You are not natural," he spat. "You are an unbound catastrophe." His blade rose high, gathering warp power until the sky screamed around it. "And I will end you before your existence ends us all." Hulk roared and charged. An animal cry, a human plea, a cosmic defiance. Their collision birthed a shockwave that tore open the horizon. And in the split second before impact, the warp shrieked, because something else, something older and hungrier, pushed through the rift behind the Primarch, drawn by the promise of a universe-shattering rage. The rift behind the Primarch widened as Hulk and the ancient warrior collided, their impact rippling through the molten landscape in waves that tore stone from its foundations and sent rivers of fire spiraling upward into the storm-lit sky. The shockwave cracked the battlefield open like a fracture spreading through glass. Ultramarines and Dark Angels were thrown from their feet. Black Legionnaires tumbled across the slagged ground. Even the Titan, its legs braced machine spirit howling, was forced backward by the cosmic concussion, its void shields flickering like tattered banners in the hurricane winds. Hulk's fist smashed into the Primarch's chestplate, cracking the warp-forged armor and sending arcs of psychic lightning spiraling outward. The Primarch retaliated with a blast of warp energy that hammered into Hulk's ribs, lifting the Emerald Titan from the ground and hurling him through the smouldering remnants of a ruined fortress. He rose instantly, but something else was rising with him. The rift behind the Primarch pulsed like the opening of a colossal eye. Shadows bled across the ruined world, twisting into clawed silhouettes that crawled across the horizon. The warp's presence grew suffocating, thick, oppressive, heavy, as if the Imperium itself strained to enter reality. Hulk felt the pressure claw at his mind, each whisper from the abyss promising release from guilt, rage, and fear. Banner felt it too, felt the pull like icy fingers dragging at his thoughts, urging surrender. For a heartbeat, Hulk wavered under the weight of the Primarch's unrelenting assault and the warp's seductive hunger. But Banner's voice, hoarse and broken, pushed through. "Don't give in." The Primarch lunged again, sword blazing with apocalyptic radiance as he brought it down in an arc meant to cleave Hulk in two. Hulk caught the blade with both hands, molten sparks erupting between his fingers as psychic flame carved deep grooves into his palms. The ground shook beneath their struggle. The Primarch leaned into the strike, muscles and warp glow burning with lethal intent. Hulk's arms trembled, legs sinking into the molten earth as the blade forced lower and lower. Then something vast stirred in the rift. A colossal silhouette towered behind the Primarch, wings of shadow unfurling, horns like cathedral spires rising above a crown of ruin. The air froze. The warp screamed through the tear. A demon prince of impossible scale, drawn by Hulk's escalating fury, summoned by the psychic storm of their duel, pressed its enormous face against the fabric of reality. Its voice crawled across every mind in the battlefield, freezing blood, twisting thoughts into knots of terror. "Unleash him," it whispered, words layered in 1,000 tortured voices. "Let him fall into us." The Primarch tensed. Hulk roared. The demon prince reached through the rift, clawed fingers tearing reality like silk. The world bent under its presence. Astartes screamed as their armor buckled from psychic pressure. The Titan's machine spirit unleashed a binary shriek. Even the Primarch, forged through war and darkness, struggled beneath the weight of this new arrival. Hulk felt the rift dragging at him, stretching his rage, magnifying it, feeding on it, craving it. He staggered. Banner felt the cold pull inside his chest. The Primarch's sword pressed closer, and the Demon Prince reached out. Mine. The word echoed through the warp like a decree. Hulk's vision blurred into a storm of crimson and green. His muscles burned, his bones shook, his thoughts fractured. Banner tried to rise within, to seize some fragment of control, but the psychic storm overwhelmed him, drowning his voice beneath a tidal wave of roaring, shrieking fury. Then something snapped. Not a break, but a refusal. A break in the storm, not in Hulk. A single breath of clarity. Banner's voice tore through the chaos, not as a whisper, but as a scream of defiance. We are not yours. Hulk roared with him. A roar that split the air. A roar that battered the warp. A roar that sent the Demon Prince recoiling. A roar that shook the Primarch to his core. Green light erupted from Hulk's chest, not born from rage alone, but from something deeper. Banner's will fused with Hulk's strength. It flooded outward, searing through the Primarch's sword energy and flinging him backward in a wave of incandescent power. The blade tore free from Hulk's grasp, spiraling into the sky like a falling star. The molten ground exploded beneath the Emerald Titan as he surged upright, every muscle ignited in radiant fire. He didn't attack the Primarch. He leapt, straight toward the rift, straight toward the Demon Prince. The monstrous entity reached with glee, expecting a broken mind and an offered soul. Instead, it met a fist. Hulk slammed into the Demon Prince with a roar so thunderous the warp convulsed. The impact shattered claw and bone, ripping the rift wider for a heartbeat before Hulk forced it shut with a second, earth-shaking blow. Reality buckled and screamed. The Demon Prince's form twisted between dimensions, bellowing in furious agony as the Titan's fist pummeled its colossal face. The warp light around them imploded, collapsing inward like a dying star. The rift collapsed in a violent snap. The sky screamed, and then fell silent. Hulk crashed into the remains of the battlefield, the last echoes of the implosion rolling across the plains. The Primarch, thrown to one knee by the backlash, stared at him with something approaching awe and something approaching fear. The Astartes looked on in stunned silence. Even the Black Legion wavered, sensing the reversal. The battlefield fell still. Hulk's arms dropped to his sides, chest heaving, body scorched and trembling. Banner's voice inside him faded, exhausted, but still present, still himself. The silence deepened, smoke drifted, ash settled, the warp retreated, and the Imperium, the traitors, and the very galaxy were left with a single, unanswerable question. Had Hulk saved them, or doomed them? The Emerald Giant stood alone at the center of the silent ruin, the last roar fading, the last embers dying, and the last echo of the warp whispering, "This is not the end.